Good afternoon and welcome to today's reading. Today we're going to be looking at, I think, one of the more frustrating aspects that we go through when an idea is percolating in our head. And that's we can get these moments of absolute clarity. And then when we try to explain it to somebody else, or even if we try to take it and write it down for ourselves in some way, to communicate that idea, it just fizzles away and disappears. Or we may be working really actively on a project and have some really good ideas, and all of a sudden something else kind of comes in and pushes it out of the way. We now have this other idea that's really clear, but if we try to go back and tap into what it was, that the idea that we had, it seems to be gone. And I thought about that and I said, it's kind of interesting because this is almost like when you're tuning into radio frequencies, right? If we think of our thoughts and our inspiration, and a lot of people talk about downloads and all of this kind of stuff. But when it comes to clarity, it's sometimes, to me, as simple as tuning the dial on the transmitter or the receiver to see what radio frequencies and stations you can kind of catch. And like when I was growing up, I had this a radio, right? Like the one with the old dial on it. And I remember how frustrating it could be because there were two stations that sat like so close on the dial, and you'd have to kind of tweak it a little bit. And depending on the cloud coverage or different environmental things going on, one signal would be boosted over the other. And I think it was just mostly in proximity to me. So if I was tuning into a station that was closer, I could get it in, but sometimes if there was some kind of interference, I could get a station that was a little bit farther away. And it got to the point where you could almost intuitively know how to tune in to get just on the edge of the station that you wanted. And that's kind of where this reading is going to be going today. It's looking at how can we play with our internal reception system so that we're tuning into what we want to tune into, and sometimes to also help us understand when something, like when you have those kind of two ideas side by side, why one will kind of go into static and be difficult to hold on to, while another one will snap in crystal clarity. Because sometimes, again, it's not so much about you and what's going on, but sometimes it's time. It's we'll call it cosmic weather that can impact. It's the people we're with, because sometimes, when we're walking around with different people, we might have a different idea. We might even be kind of tuning in. My kids are always telling me, because we'll be together and I'll say something and they'll be like, get off my brainwave kind of thing. And that's what we're kind of playing with and looking at with this spread today. And I kind of looked at it as, when something is forming beneath the surface, what tunes or distorts the messages. And there's a lot of different things that can go, because when we look at our systems, our receiving systems, even when you look at, say, telecommunications, there are a lot of different things. You have the infrastructure, like the actual towers and the wires and the lines. You have the weather that could be impacting. You have, the proximity to the signal. All of those things will impact how clear. And so it's important when we are, trying to understand and fine tune and receive messages that are coming to us, that we keep that in mind, that there are many levels. And even if we have the absolute perfect, wonderful equipment, that there might be something else that's, at play that we never even thought to look at. And so the purpose of today's reading is to explore ways to play with how you may learn to fine tune your receiver. And again, I think it's really important to remember that when we're looking at receiving messages, there is no right, there is no wrong, there is no, I have to figure this out, right? A lot of times these things happen in their own way. And so it's really important for us to remember that, you know, there are so many different pieces in play, and some messages we're only meant to glimpse and never understand and never receive full clarity. And others we are meant to receive like complete, right? You ever have those moments where you get like this full perfect idea, crystal clarity, every little detail comes in and you're like, wow, where did that come from? Right? This is what we're kind of looking at. And you know, to also remember that when we're looking at the messages and we're looking at, things like timing and the audience, like who is it that we're wanting to communicate our message with, that there's no brute forcing this, right? Like if you brute force it, the message is going to get distorted. It is going to come in bits and pieces. It's going to come in backwards, all kinds of ways. And if you try to express it from that brute force, all you're going to end up with in the end really is gibberish, and that's what we're looking to kind of avoid. So the question I'm going to shuffle into our cards today is what best supports your channel surfing? And I kind of look at this tuning in as that, because even on a radio receiver, if you have no idea where the radio stations are, you're just channel surfing and you're looking for what it is. And I think unlike, say, modern satellite radio, what you're looking to do is you're looking to fine tune your system. I had Sirius radio for a while when I got one of my vehicles, and it was like push a button, skip, 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 right? And so you never really got, you were still kind of at the whims of whatever the radio decided it was going to pick up. Whereas when you fine tune, you can catch little things that the skip button on modern radios may never pick up. So, what best supports your channel surfing? Right. Let's pick our cards. It's out. One, two, three, four, five. Here we go. Okay. Our first card is asking what frequency is connected to the signal being broadcasted. So sometimes that's the important thing. And if we stick to the radio analogy throughout this whole thing, are you on AM? Are you on FM? Or I don't even know if the satellite is on its own completely different broadcasting frequency, right? So it's really important to be able to start off by understanding like what frequency is connected to the signal, right? Like where is it being broadcasted from? And here we have the Four of Wands. So our frequency is that of, joy. It's that of celebration. It's that of abundance. And that's the frequency that we want to be tuning into. There are many, many other frequencies out there that messages come through. But right now, the frequency that we're being asked to really kind of hone in and tune into is that of, abundance, that of celebration, that of joy and appreciation. And so, one of the ways that you can start to fine tune and to adjust your receiver, which is your body and your energy system, is to start noticing, one, how much time in a day do you spend just enjoying life? Do you look for moments where you can have, happiness and celebration? What are the things that you celebrate? Do you focus on celebrating like all of the disasters that go on in your life, because we can celebrate them, right? Like I think that's the other piece is how are you coming at this? Are you like what are the things that you celebrate in your life? Are you celebrating all of the abundance, all of the blessings, all of the connections? Are you celebrating all the perceived failures, all the shortcomings, all the places where you lack or somebody has something more than you do? So this is the very first thing that we want to be looking at is what frequency are we tuning into? And we're being asked, you know, with the Four of Wands, we're being asked to tune into our definition of abundance, our definition of joy, our definition of celebration. And so if I think about today, I got up this morning and I went outside and I just celebrated the fact that, I could go and I could put my feet on the ground outside. And that I think one of the things I was really happy about was my lawn is all raked. So it's really important to be able to tune into those kinds of things, because the more we can tune in to the frequency and feel how it is in our body, then when the messages come in, we'll be able to feel whether they're in alignment with those feelings. And so I think that's something that we really need to be paying attention to. And speaking of how it feels in the body, that leads us to the next question is what physical supports may help ground the signal into clarity? And so if you're looking at abundance, if you're looking at joy and celebration, and you think about when I am truly grateful, how does that feel in my body? Then when a message comes through, you can go, does this idea, does this thought, does this message feel the same or feel in alignment with what I was feeling when I was thinking about gratitude? And here we have the Page of Cups. And interestingly, having the Page of Cups in the north, again, here we have a water card that's sitting in an earth position. And so it gives the opportunity to really look for those places where you can make something really malleable in the sense of I always look at two ways when there's always two ways when I think of earth and water. And I think you can either end up with mud or you can end up with clay. And the reason I think to clay in this kind of thing, especially if we're looking at abundance, right? And you're looking at clay and you're looking how a potter will use water to keep the clay malleable and to help shape it into what it is that we want. And that's what we're being asked is we're being asked to use our feelings to shape our reality into what it is that we want. Now, what I will say is because there's no judgment in the readings, even if you end up with mud, that can be good because if you think about it, there's a lot of mud baths that you can have. There's there's a face mask that's mud, or there's foot soaks that are mud. Mud has a very good healing quality. The thing is with mud is that it has to be treated in a bit of a different way because mud is a lot more water than it is earth. And so it has a tendency to run away on us. If you don't have a bucket or something to put your feet in when you have a mud bath, or a lot of times, like if you go into those mud soaks, right? Like you actually like get into a pool and sit in it, there has to be some kind of containment, and that containment in and of itself is made of earth. And so it's really important to be thinking about like do the feeling like is one of the things that you need to be tuning into is a healing, because I think of like mud baths more as a healing, and then I think of like working with clay as more of a creative expression and a building of something concrete. And that might be where you're looking at, right? Like, is the Four of Wands asking you to celebrate and look at abundance in what you're creating or in what you're feeling, and how can you contain those feelings to increase and augment the potency that they have in order to help you really ground that signal of what you're trying to receive into the 3D world. The next one we have is what pressures may be distorting the message. And this is where I find, things like timing, things like feeling you need to figure it out, that there is an answer. And that's why I always try to say that there's no, when I do the readings, there's no right or wrong answer. There's no pressure to figure things out. It's just this is the way systems work, and we need to be able to flow with the way the systems work so that instead of like really pushing and pushing to try to get something done, we're seeing where there might be gumminess. And when you see where there might be problems, then instead of just, I'm just going to beat it with a hammer, you can look and say, oh, okay, this is something I can do to help ease, right? And if you're looking back to our little dial, if you go too fast, you miss those little signals that might boop in. And so learning how to kind of slow and turn back and kind of like play with that, that's kind of what we're looking at. And here we have the Five of Swords. Now, the Five of Swords for me is an interesting card because all the fives are midpoints. They're all crossroads and they're all choice point cards where you're either going to move forward with what you've learned or there's something you've missed and you have to go back. Now, I also look at the Five of Swords as that I think it's armistice, like where you might have a war going on and one day they call for a 1 day ceasefire. And that allows the different people, like the different armies, to go and clear their people off the battlefield, gather the resources that might be spewed kind of along on the fields, and have basically a day to catch their breath. And that's what the Five of Swords is for me. And that means that, as you're sitting here and you're kind of clearing your own battlefields and you're taking stock of the resources you have left and what's going on, and really looking at where are you now in regards to whatever conflicts you might be fighting, and saying, well, do I want to go back and continue fighting, or is there something here I have learned that I've got greater clarity, so now I can actually call for a ceasefire and move forward with peace in the attempt to really bring understanding to what's going on. And so when we look at it through the lens of the pressure that's distorting the message, the pressure that we might be feeling is we might be feeling that we have to solve whatever this is, whatever this thought is, whatever this idea is, whatever this messages that's being broadcast, that we have to brute force our way into understanding and getting clarity instead of allowing ourselves to step back and be patient and allow the dust to settle and really kind of see what's going on here. And, it's really interesting when I look at this card. We have this card sitting in South, which is fire, and the guy on the card has very red, fiery hair. And, it can be a bit of a stereotype that redheads are very hot tempered and everything. And so this is one of those things where when you just look at the look on his face, he's kind of like, I'm not done yet. I really want to keep going, and I've got my sword here. And so it's really important when we're looking at this that we allow any aggression, that we allow any anger or frustration to settle before we even decide what our next step is going to be, right? Because I remember many a times where I'd be frustrated with that dial. I'm like, trying to kind of really force it in. And of course, if you're doing that, the signal will never really settle, because chances are you're going to be so frustrated you're going to miss when it goes by. So then our next one asks, how does the message feel and shift when sharing it with others? So let's say that you've understood what it feels like when you're really in a place of gratitude and abundance, and you can celebrate and you're filled with joy. You've understood how to bring that forward in and how it feels in your body, right? Like you understand where it's solidifying and where it's still kind of shifting around. You've allowed the dust to settle, and the message, becomes a bit more clear. And now that you have kind of a clear message, and this is where it gets a bit tricky, because the message may be very clear in your head, but now we're asking, how does it feel when you try to share? Because this comes down to timing as well. And if you try to share your message with the wrong people or at the wrong time, then the message may get distorted. And that's what this is asking, is how can you feel who the message is for and how to best express it? And here we have the Ten of Wands. And this is always an interesting card from this deck, because she's, you know, carrying five, but the reflection of it shows 10, meaning that, you really want to look at the distortion with that you're feeling, because when you try to share it with other people, look at how you're feeling when you're expressing it. So what I mean by that is, if you're trying to share your idea with somebody and they're looking at you and they're completely clueless, do you go, okay, you know, it's obviously not landing. Let's take a step back and, maybe I'll try this again later, or I'll try this a different time. Or do you just really try to go, no, no, you got to understand, right? Like, just listen to me. This is the way it is. And so the more you try to come at it from that perspective, where I have this really great idea and I need to tell you about this really great idea, and I'm not going to stop until you understand, and they're not getting it, no matter how you come at it, then that's what you're looking at, is less their reaction. How are you feeling, right? How do you feel when somebody is missing the point of what it is that you're trying to say? And that's the feeling that you want to tune into, because that's the feeling of distortion. That's the feeling of static in the body, and saying that, there's something in this situation. Either it's the person, or it's like the location where you're having the conversation, or the timing that you're having it. Something is off, and you need to step back, sit with the emotion, sit with the feeling, and then once it settles, you know, step into it again and see if that reproduces with someone else. And that's what you're looking for, because a lot of times these big messages that come in, they're meant for us to share at a certain time and with certain people. And so that's really what we're feeling into. If you're feeling, and you can really use that joy, right? Like if you have this idea and you go, I want to share this idea with so and so, and you feel the emotions that you've identified from the Four of Wands, that's who you're going to share it with. But if you go, oh, I want to share it with somebody else, and there's some anxiety, there's some worry, there's some whatever, I would say hold off and sit with that and try to understand where that's coming from. Because if you share from anything short of the Four of Wands, then the message is going to come through distorted, or it's going to come through broken, or you're going to be unable to share it at all. And then the final question that we have is what breakthrough may come from a clean transmission? So let's say you have shared this, and you've shared it in a way that it doesn't become a burden to somebody else, that you don't feel that you have to carry this and that it's yours and it becomes hard and heavy, and you're able to share it nice and clearly. Then what breakthroughs may come from this clean transmission? And here we have the moon. And the moon, it's our intuition. It taps us into cycles. Again, it connects us to water and all of the things that are very innate within us. The other thing with the moon is the moon also helps us to see, like, I love having the dog and the wolf on here because the moon also helps us to free ourselves from being chained down and being tamed and allowing us to really step into that wild, creative, fluid side of ourselves. And so that instead of feeling that we're trapped in the status quo and that we always have to follow everyone else's rules, you know, the breakthrough is going to come and say, you know what, here's a place for me to be free. Here's a place for me to really express what it is that I want to express and to really be who it is that I want to be. And once you're able to complete one full cycle of receiving the transmission, sitting with it, getting the clarity, and expressing it out, however it's meant to be expressed, you're going to realize that there is something very intuitive in the whole process. And because, we started off with abundance and joy and gratitude, it's all rooted in the feelings, and the feelings will augment and intensify any of the broadcasts that we are trying to tune ourselves into. So, a couple things that I find interesting with this is we have the page and we have the moon, which are both water cards. Now, with the moon being a major arcana card, here we're looking at, a bit of an increase in augmentation in the way that the water and the emotions and the creativity is going to be felt during this whole process. And then we have two wand cards, meaning that a lot of this is energetic, right? A lot of this is going to be felt through the way we are connecting into our energetics, the way we're connecting to the universal energetics. And really, these two cards kind of almost stand frequency wise on opposite extremes, right? This is all opening. It is all receiving, right? Like we're celebrating, we're sharing. And then this one is very closed and constrictive. And we want to be able to make sure that whatever it is that we are celebrating is helping us to step away from the constriction. And then right smack dab in the middle, we have an air card, which is all on, how do we see things? How do we communicate things? What are the conflicts? And it's interesting that as the third card in a 5-card spread, we also have a 5 that is that midpoint in a conflict. And so if you're looking at the progression, this is the one that's going to determine whether this becomes a burden or whether we understand that, hey, there's no way that we're carrying nearly what we think we're carrying, and we can let things go and we can breathe easy and we can maybe come out of that fetal position and start to stand on our own. So interesting cards that we've had come up, and it'll be interesting to see how these kind of play out as you try to play around with your own system. If you like this, like the video and subscribe to the channel. And I hope that you did get something out of this, some kind of aha moment. I always look for those breakthrough moments that people have when they watch the videos. In the meantime, take care, and I will see you around the webs.